As demand accelerates and grid constraints tighten, energy reliability, capacity, and cost are now front and center for the business community and the Delaware General Assembly. In this episode, we will dig into why energy availability is shaping economic development decisions, how grid congestion and infrastructure limits are changing the conversation, and what it will take to support growth, from established employers to energy-intensive projects like data centers. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Delaware Deep Dive, a podcast by the Delaware State Chamber of Commerce. I'm your host, Kelly Basil, and today we are focusing on the topic of energy, and more specifically, how is it increasingly shaping economic development, business growth, and long-term competitiveness in Delaware and across the region. I'm grateful to have three guests join me today. Each of them brings a different but critical perspective on how energy is generated, delivered, and consumed, and what it will take to meet rising demand while maintaining reliability and affordability. So let me introduce Brian Jordan, Director of External Affairs at Delmarva Power, Andrew Cottone, founder of Aternium, and Joe Kerecman, Government and Regulatory Director at Calpine, a business unit of Constellation Energy Group. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Kelly.
Oh, hello.
All right. I like to give everyone, all of our listeners, I should say, a chance to just get to know my guests before we really dive into it. So I'll start with Brian. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. My name is Brian Jordan. I work for Delmarva Power. I'm its Director of External Affairs. I've been with the company for 6 years. Most of that time I served as its attorney, its in-house counsel, representing the company at the Public Service Commission or in the courts. Before that, I had my own law firm, been barred since 2010. Before that, I was in the Peace Corps in Bulgaria, and I do still speak the language, so if you need a Bulgarian translator, just let me know.
Andrew.
The people I knew who speak Bulgarian just went from 0 to 1. So, hello, everybody. Hey, guys. And thank you for having me, Kelly. I'm Andrew Cottone. I have a PhD in chemistry, but really I'm an entrepreneur. I've started a company a long time ago in Delaware, built it up from near bankruptcy, and today every color in your cell phone and a lot of other products are manufactured in Delaware. So I tried to parlay that experience into a clean hydrogen company. And I'm not trying to do this the way it's done in California, subsidy after subsidy. We are profitable without subsidies because we join this with isolating another product called heavy water or deuterium that is critical to the United States and including some energy aspects. So I'm looking forward to being on your heavy water podcast in a little bit.
Heavy water podcast.
Sounds exciting.
Thrilling stuff. Joe?
Yeah, Joe Kerecman again. Thank you, Kelly. I'm with Calpine, and I've been with Calpine about 14 years. And now, of course, earlier this year, we were acquired by Constellation, so I'm very happy to be working with Constellation. Back to nuclear, I actually started my career building nuclear power plants, working with Bechtel. So my career is extremely diverse, but all in the energy sector. I've done project development, I've done construction management, I've worked at PJM and competitive markets, I've done venture capital, I've done structured finance, and I've capped off my career now for the last 14 years in government relations. So it's been an interesting ride, and looking forward to a new chapter with Constellation.
Awesome.
I'm doing all that stuff now. It's absolutely miserable. We'd love to have a guide through this.
That's the tale of an entrepreneur.
Oh my God! And you're still smiling.
Oh yeah, I've been there. It's a fun. I was actually the president of a waste management to energy company at one point in time.
I was 2 inches taller before I started this process.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into it. Electric power is being called the driving factor in site selection, whether that's a new location or an expansion decision for a business. But beyond supply, how important are things like reliability, cost stability, and a diversified energy mix? I'll let whoever wants to take that first.
Yeah, I'll go, and certainly we could talk more about that after others opine as well. But I mean, access to reliable supply of energy is really a primary factor right now in site selection. Cost stability, diversified energy mix. I mean, there are important considerations for long-term operational viability. For large power loads, and when talking site selection for data centers in particular, the primary driver is energy considerations to get connected quickly and access to available supply. Timing to get interconnected and the cost of the upgrades, the transmission upgrades to get interconnected, that's also a very key factor. Really also being close to a generator or even being on the site of a generator, that's another good factor as well. So, when you're looking at that, there's certain advantages to doing that as well. Certainly a diversified source of energy supply, like the resources available through the PJM market, can provide for resilient operations, can be helpful for those loads with corporate sustainability goals. Multiple energy sources can reduce dependence on any single fuel type. It mitigates risk from supply disruption. So yeah, there's a lot of considerations there, but getting connected quickly and what those costs are to get connected, that's probably the key driver at this point in time.
The cost, so when you're talking about costs, I look from a user perspective, both in my time at Adesis and what we're doing at Aternium, the costs are hidden in a lot of the delays and in the permitting process, so that needs to be streamlined. But being close to your intakes, like electricity, are vital for companies like Aternium. And I think you have to define reliability. When I think about it, my time at Adesis and the economy that Delaware is moving into, a lot more high tech, the hospitals and the fintech that we have, any little blip of energy is a major problem. It's not annoying like you have to reset your clocks at home. No, all your fancy and expensive equipment is damaged and shut down, and you're down for days sometimes when just a split-second blip happens. That type of reliability in a high-tech economy is exactly what we should be expecting. That without the blips is what we should be expecting.
Yeah, and from a public utilities perspective, I mean, there's two ways to talk about energy, and that's reliability and affordability. When it comes to reliability, we have made it a mission to be reliable with Delmarva Power. And with our parent company, PHI, we're the second most reliable utility in the nation, which is great because when you come into our service territory, we have to connect you, right? Doesn't matter who it is. So we have not just businesses, we have hospitals, schools, residents, and all kinds of businesses. And to Andrew's point, I mean, if there is a blip, that's money. That's a connection that's lost. If it's a hospital and you have a patient on that operating table and there's a blip, there's significant consequences that could come out of that. And so we have really focused on that reliability thing. And for us, we kind of take it for granted. And we want our customers to take for granted when they hit that switch, the lights come on, the heater starts. And so we have been very, very pro-reliability and making the investments to make sure we have a reliable grid for everyone in Delaware.
And that's a great segue to my next question related to the grid. So we talk about blips. There's a lot around grid constraints right now. A big, I think, topic of conversation in Delaware. And so, where does the state fall in that conversation, and who are the users, and where are those constraints coming from?
Well, I would say, currently there's been some discussion about the need for adding new generation in Delaware. I mean, clearly that's topical at this point in time. And that is one way of addressing growing needs, right? That raises other issues, though, on what type of generation, given current state policy objectives, is actually developable in the state, I think, at this point in time. I mean, for instance, is there interest in new gas resources? I mean, that's a big question, I think, for Delaware, to answer. Then when you go beyond that, if there is, are there suitable sites? Are there suitable sites where you can get it permitted and sited and so forth, given local considerations and so forth? And then is there available gas pipeline capacity, right? So if you look at Delaware, from a northern-southern standpoint, Calpine, we developed and built, I think, probably the most southern plant in Delaware right now, which is the Garrison Energy Center. Now, we sold that off years ago. I think it's owned by Vista right now. But, with Indian River shut down, that's probably the furthest south plant that you have. And then you run into a lighter transmission system, I think 130 kV down there. And I don't think there's a whole lot of robust gas infrastructure down there. So you really have to look at what you can cite. However, I would also point out, though, since Delaware is a part of PJM, the load in PJM and Delaware has a lot of access to a large number of diverse resources. Now, I know we're going to talk a little bit later about the recent interconnection queue, which was an amazing feat to have that level of interest in terms of interconnecting to PJM. So while adding generation in Delaware will help with in-state constraints, building out additional transmission and moving more power into the state, which I'm sure Delmarva will be happy to build out that transmission to move that power into the state, that's a real viable option as well. And dealing with those constraints, minimizing congestion costs, all can be accomplished that way as well. And if you look at what the PSC is looking to do right now, and I believe there's also corresponding legislation, since a lot of the growth is data center related, to actually just allocate those costs to the data centers or any large load and not to the traditional ratepayer, that's a good thing. And I think, I commend the PSC for taking that initiative.
I hear hydrogen is going to be a big growth sector in Delaware.
There you
Tell
go.
us more.
But I think I love those transmission lines. I'm from a really pro-Delaware kind of guy. Those transmission lines allow the electrons to flow in both directions. So I say, let's produce the energy here and let's sell that out of the state. Let's be a net producer of energy, because I look at the electrons as a stem cell, an economic stem cell. The more electrons we produce, clean and low-cost electrons is that balance we need to strike. And that will drive our economy, a lasting economy that produces the jobs that we want. And I think with our hydrogen aspect, and really with the energy generation aspect, I mean, you have to be concerned about the policy, but I'm less concerned about the policy. I'm more concerned about what the community thinks. What is the community saying? And when you see their electric price go up 40%, I think we have to pay close attention and listen to the voter.
I mean, I would add that those transmission lines are a big thing, and as you mentioned, it was something we would love to get more of. I mean, when offshore wind, and I'm not sure really what the status is at this point, was looking viable or at least going to move forward, one of the concerns was, is our transmission grid able to accommodate that new energy, and with data centers and all of that. But if we want to move in that direction, we've got to upgrade the transmission lines. There's just there's no other option for it. So that's a big thing from our perspective.
And I want to give I might be speaking out of turn here, so feel free to correct me, but I'm not a pipeline guy. But when you look at Kent County and Sussex County and beyond, the progress that Chesapeake Energy has made down there in laying responsible, advanced, and safe pipelines is really exciting. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised by that. And so from my perspective, it's a lot. I don't know from the energy perspective, but take a look at Chesapeake Utilities. I think I called them energy. But Chesapeake Utilities has done a great job down there.
And that reminds me, I did want to go back to the comment about getting gas pipelines down, because it is difficult. I mean, we were looking at a 7-year timeline. If we were to restart Indian River, or if somebody were to build a plant down there, getting that gas infrastructure down there is going to take time. And I think part of it is a resource constraint that in terms of actually getting the materials and the laborers who can do it, onto that project. When they deregulated in Delaware, the idea was you would get more generation. People would build generation, pick up the slack, and that just didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And now here we are.
Yeah, I know Delaware is heavy on importing energy, and we really don't produce much.
That's an understatement. just to be clear here, we import 99 times more energy. It's a catastrophe.
Yeah, and there's an imbalance to that, and a supply and demand issue. And so, this is off script, I'll say.
We've been very happy to own the plants in northern Delaware now for quite some time, which we, of course, bought from the Delmarva affiliate Connective years ago, and, Hay Road and Edgemore, and we continue to own peaking plants, as a result of the acquisition of Calpine. Certain market rule considerations come into play. We were obligated to sell those plants off, and they are sold and going through a regulatory proceeding right now until that closes, but and they'll be in good hands. So, but yeah, we've been happy to own those plants and being a major power supplier to Delaware for years now.
That's great. Well, let's go towards PJM. For the listeners who may not know what PJM is, I think we might want to start with just a quick high level, who they are and what's our relationship, and then I'll launch into the recent news that Joe, you and I talked about. So can you just explain what PJM is?
PJM is a regional, an RTO, a regional transmission organization. It serves, multi-functions. One is regional planning, so it plans out the transmission grid that when they come up with system reinforcements and expansions, generally built by the utilities that own the underlying transmission assets. So Delmarva being part of the Exelon companies, they own all their transmission system within their utility footprints. So they serve that function, planning, They operate the grid. They dispatch power plants. They control the security constraint dispatch of power plants to make sure you don't overload the system. And then they run markets, competitive markets for energy, competitive markets for capacity, which is really resource adequacy, which is essentially it's a reservation fee that generators are paid to be available. When you want generation to come online, you're paying a fee to make sure those generators are there to run. And so those are kind of the three, I'd say, principal: planning, operations, and markets.
I want to jump in here and just say how phenomenally complex the American grid is, and the reliability that you have. You expect to turn on the lights, and it does. Like, the balance is amazing, and the complexity starts in the name. PJM stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland, but it also incorporates Kentucky and Illinois and probably a lot of other states.
Parts of.
Parts of.
Right.
Either way, why is it a PJKMI or
Right.
whatever else is in there?
Yeah.
Hey, that's just a stupid name. It doesn't really represent what this is, and it's a lot of the complexity of what we face. And then and so Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland, but it's so much more.
Right.
And that reliability is amazing that they have that coordination.
Yeah, Brian, I want to give you a moment to add to this too, because I know that you directly work with PJM all the time.
So I think it's 13 states that are within PJM.
All are parts of
all
13
are parts.
states in D.C.
And I think that also underscores, if you're looking at energy from a political perspective and you're looking at Delaware, state lines, boundaries, that kind of thing, you're getting half the picture. Because again, PJM, what's happening in PJM is going to affect each one of the states. That's part of it. So something that happens in Pennsylvania is going to have an effect on Delaware and vice versa. And it's really... It is a complicated topic, but it's one that I think politicians and regulators have got to get a handle on, understanding PJM's role in where we are today when it comes to supplying electricity, and what they can do, what their role is, and what a public utility can do.
Brian, I think you were generous saying they get half the picture. It sounds like, based on what you just said, they get 1/13 of the picture if they stop their thoughts at the state line.
And you figure, if it's covering parts of Kentucky, if you want to look at it politically, Delaware is very different than Kentucky. And so, the decisions that, say, our state makes when it comes to energy, whether it's based on environmental views or energy views, is going to be different than in other states. And when you look at Delaware with a coastline, what we can do with offshore wind versus something like, again, I'm not trying to pick on Kentucky, but without a coastline, what can they do? You've really got to look at it, I think, from those RTO perspectives, and not, here's what this state can do, here's what this state can do.
So Joe, going back to you, we recently saw that over 800 new generation projects are seeking to connect to the PJM grid under a reformed process designed to move projects forward faster. Yet demand, especially from data centers, as you mentioned earlier, is still expected to outpace supply. From your perspective, will changes like this meaningfully close the gap, or are we still facing a structural challenge when it comes to keeping up with growth?
So, PJM just ran closed an interconnection queue last week, and it was extremely robust participation in that queue process, right? As you mentioned, there was 811 unique projects, diverse projects, a lot of gas, nuclear upgrades, solar combined with storage, and even some wind were, in that as well. 211 gigawatts, 211,000 megawatts of generation that is interested in interconnecting. We don't yet know how that breaks down state by state. PJM will release that data at some later point. But again, that is an extremely strong signal that these markets work, and they work well. And there's more work to do. Certainly there is as well. But it's also important to compare 211 gigawatts to when PJM did their last auction was for the 2027-28 delivery year. So the delivery year starts on June 1 of 2027 and runs through May 31st of 2028. They cleared a little under 135,000 megawatts of capacity in that auction. Compare that to 211 gigawatts of new interest. That would be on top of that existing. Now, historically, the PJM queue has yielded maybe a 30%, interest coming to actual project fruition, so to speak. So, but still a very, very big number. I don't know that we're outpacing necessarily, that we're not keeping up with the pace of demand. I mean, clearly there's challenges, don't get me wrong, but at this point in time, there's still nearly like 190 gigawatts of power on the grid that didn't, some of that did not clear in the capacity auction. So there's still a fair, robust supply out there. And you got to recognize there's a lot of slack in the system. Like when we get tighter, it's only certain hours of the year. So given what's going on at PJM right now with a lot of reforms in the capacity market at this point in time, which are still pending, likely to be filed at the FERC in like mid-June, they're also looking at if a data center wants to connect and they can either bring their own generation, they can participate in a reliability backstop auction. And if they don't do either one of those things or they're not ready yet, they also can interconnect with a connect and manage strategy that PJM is working through right now. So in the event that they come online, they would basically do like demand response, essentially. They would interrupt their load, if you will, during those instances where the grid is really, really tight. They can then either like data centers, they have like external facing functions where they're servicing like you and I and all that with AI, or they're doing like internal computing. When they're doing internal computing, they have the ability to sort of vary some of that as well. So they can actually cycle their load a little bit. And then, of course, they ultimately have like standby generators as well at the site. They can actually dispatch some of those generators as well. So there's a lot of mechanics in play, if you will. So I don't know that the demand is outpacing the ability for the system to supply. And like I said, I thought that last interconnection queue, really solid performance. So.
What type of variability can data centers bring? I guess it depends on how it's built, but is there a rule of thumb? That's interesting.
You know what, you'd have to talk to them. All I understand right now is, again, if they're external facing, meaning out to like you and I and, the medical environment, university environment, any of that, that needs to be pretty much 24/7. But if they're doing like internal computing, learning, and that sort of thing, they do have the ability to cycle that power a bit. Now, how much they do or not, I don't know. Although, that said, I was looking at a report recently, and I think it was done by the Duke University Nicholas Institute. And I think they said something along the line, there's about 0.5% of curtailment capability, of flexibility. So within PJM, that amounts to about 18 gigawatts of this flexibility that they would have. So, don't hold me to that, but, that
gives it directionally. And I was
a little bit of directional insight. Yeah.
I was looking because we're setting our hydrogen plant to be a demand response. And that was another magic term that I didn't know anything about before I got into this.
Yeah.
And our flexibility can be up from 100% down to 30%. Anything below 30%, it just makes sense to shut off. But that can be really significant. And when Delaware starts to look to be a net energy exporter, and hydrogen's not ready to be energy yet, we'll make it ready in about 10 years. But when you guys are building more plants and we can export electrons, we can convert some of those electrons into hydrogen and then ship that out too. So we could be a net energy exporter on a couple different, Delaware could be on a couple different profiles, but demand response can be really powerful for consumers, the community, and lowering or stabilizing our bills.
I agree.
Well said.
And I love that. Yeah, it's. I did get some statistics, or I should say, some figures here. Those 811 projects, if they were all to go operational, and we get all of that gigawatt of electricity, there's 67 million customers in the PJM region. It could serve double that. Which, again, when you think about this from a PJM perspective and not a state perspective, 67 million customers. And it could double that. It could serve them and then some. I mean, it would be significant.
In addition to the existing resources that are already there. That are serving those 67 million, right?
Yep. So, I mean, and I know we were very excited with that reformed queue process. So, good things.
We'll see how it works out. I'm going to take a little turn and take us to the General Assembly. There's been a slew of bills the last couple of years related to energy pricing. I would love to hear your perspective on, do you think that these responses are getting to the root of the issue?
I'm from the government and I'm here to help. 9 scariest words in the English language. Since 2006, the Delaware bill has gone from under 12 cents a kilowatt hour to 16.5 cents on average a kilowatt hour, according to the Delaware Public Advocate. We don't need more policies. We need more generation. We need that very generation. And we need that generation running at better capacities, not 40 or 50% capacity. And we need the base load to be able to support the industry. This is on the private sector.
Yeah, I would add, I mean, there's one bill, formative bill right now, and I do participate, and I have great respect for Senator Hansen, who chairs this energy stakeholder group on a biweekly basis. And I try to make as many of them as I can. There are 2 hours on a Friday, and sometimes other things come into play here. But the one thing that's coming up from her right now, I think, and it's going to probably come up in the legislature pretty soon, really is about addressing and understanding the true scope of the challenge. And again, I say challenge, not crisis. We have a challenge in front of us to make sure we get this power built, but one of it really is understanding what the true level of the challenge actually is, and that really is about load forecasting. And so I think we're going to probably see her introducing a bill here shortly that deals with load forecasting. I know that your company's been engaged in it as well, and I think that's a good step. Pennsylvania advanced similar legislation last year. That's in play. I know that through the organization of PJM states, they're all working together. There's similar bills being considered, I think, in New Jersey, Ohio, really trying to make it ubiquitous so that whatever information is submitted to PJM, generally by the utilities regarding what their load growth is going to be, making sure it's really credible, because a lot of really serious decisions are being made about, given that information. So, you get back to garbage in, garbage out. You want to make sure you're putting really good, credible information. So I think there's a role here for the PSC to sort of provide some oversight, checks and balances, which I think is good for everybody to make sure that it's good quality information. So I think that's one important thing. I know that also the PSC is working on the model tariff, basically. I know that's delayed a little bit right now, but it still, was advancing and probably will continue to advance. I think that falls in line with House Bill 233 to some degree as well. At least certain elements of it, I think, comply with 233, so that's a good thing. I will point out, though, on the other hand, and again, I have great respect for Senator Hansen. I know her ambitions are in the right place on this, but we kind of think SB 205 might be a little premature. We think that between the model tariff that the PSC is working on, the work that PJM is doing as well, in both instances, it's cost causation based, right? So if you're a big load and you're going to bring new costs, whether it be wires related costs, the model tariff will take care of that. Whether it's resource adequacy, generation costs, the work PJM is taking care of that as well, to basically distribute those costs to the cost causers, meaning the large loads, maybe the data centers in this case as well, shielding the traditional ratepayer from that. So I know that's her objective as well, but I don't think you want to put up unnecessary barriers. I was at a hearing last week with the chairman of the PAPUC, and I think he said it best. He said basically, if data centers are built in neighboring states instead of Pennsylvania, again, his frame of reference is Pennsylvania ratepayers may still bear the costs and grid impacts without receiving any of the local economic benefits. And those benefits are tax-based, those benefits are job-based. So I think, again, keep your powder dry. Hopefully everything works out with the PSC and the model tariff and what PJM is doing, and you can always reassess it. But I think right now it might be a little premature. So.
Yeah, and I've got a few thoughts on this topic, particularly having been Delmarva's attorney and dealing with some of these changes in front of the commission over the last year and in my position now. I mean, I know last year they passed legislation that increased the standard from business judgment to prudency, and that came out to a lot of fanfare. Delmarva filed a rate case in December. That legislation went effective in January, but nonetheless, we said to Senator Hansen and the General Assembly, we will submit our investments under that new prudent standard. We want to work and we want to be able to show and increase the transparency so that our customers can see what's happening, because that plays into a bigger picture here about what can and where should the General Assembly be aiming its fire, right? Because when you look at your bill, you've got your delivery costs and your supply cost. Delivery costs, that's, we're talking poles, wires, gas mains, that sort of thing, the stuff that gets your electricity or your gas to the destination. The supply cost, that's what we're talking about, PJM and gas, that's a flow through, right? So we're not profiting off of that, but the concern is you've got to be able, if you're going to affect, the public utility and what it provides, what we've seen so far has been an attempt to kind of control the distribution cost, but that's going to affect reliability.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can have a bigger impact if you look at the supply and what could be done there. We're really hopeful to talk about battery storage as an opportunity to lower those supply costs, and the idea being, we can build these utility scale battery facilities on old substations that operate similar to the LNG tank down by the stadium, right? So it's, instead of natural gas, you would have, whether it's electricity from some sort, whether it's offshore wind, solar, whatever, it would store it, and then it would return, it would then dispatch that electricity into the market, the idea being it would bring supply down. It would increase supply and bring the prices down that way. And so you would see a bigger impact on your bill because in the right direction, because those supply costs go down and that would be passed through.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, there is a delicate balance within Dover because, that requires a certain sort of nuance to be able to pass those kinds of legislation. But it really is has got to be an effort that looks at the public utilities, whether it's Delmarva or with electric and gas, or Chesapeake and gas, how we can help get that squared away and present it in a way that is going to lower bills. Because clearly, we're in an affordability crisis when it comes to utility rates, and Delmarva recognizes that. We're not shying away from it, and we have gone forward with a few programs to try to lower that. There's a demand response effort underway right now that was mentioned earlier. New one of those. The rate case I had mentioned was a way to get. We've got a proposed low to moderate income discount, 20% discount. There are these efforts to get out there and try to help the bills. And but it's going to take work. I mean, certainly we need the help of the General Assembly and to get that kind of legislation through.
Brian, where I'd love to see the General Assembly is on something proactive, like the Financial Services Act of 1981, that just laid the groundwork and prepared the field, and prepared the farmland to be able to till the soil and attract in the companies and the private sector that want to deliver a better product for Delaware. So if that type of proactive legislation can be done, I don't know what it is, I'm just a chemist, but if you can have that type of proactive legislation to attract more, that is really what I think the solution is.
Yeah, we're in a position right now. There's drafts legislation that has been introduced that really goes to what I think is the reliability. It would negatively affect the reliability part of the service we provide. There's a proposed involuntary budget cap that's being proposed of 4% of whatever our last rate base was, which we think would affect the ability to build these battery facilities. There had been an effort to introduce that cost cap in the last session, and it got stripped out at the House. The Public Service Commission tried to put it in, and it got defeated. And so now the General Assembly is back to propose a new cost cap. It raises really significant questions about what effect is that going to have on reliability? Because as we've talked about, that reliability is critical for business in Delaware. And do we want to wait and see what the issue is, and have it actually happen and then try to fix it? I mean, I don't think that's the right way forward here.
I will note on storage, though, if you look at what's currently, as a result of the queue closing and what's in the queue currently with storage, there's like 67 gigawatts. It's the largest second largest resource, if you will, in the interconnection queue right now, following natural gas. We would be delighted to work with Delmarva in building and owning storage facilities at your facilities. Obviously that's part of the competitive market as well. At Calpine, I think last year we had the largest storage project at one point in the world. I think it's 680 megawatts of storage in California. I think we've been eclipsed at this point in time, but because there's a lot of activity in storage, but we have a lot of experience in building storage as well.
And the good thing with the battery storage is, let's say we have a project for 300 megawatts, we can tell you it's 300. You can count on it. And
it's a battery basically.
Yeah,
I mean, exactly. It's like pump storage, same thing, right?
It's not approximately this, or it might be this. No, it's going to be this, and that helps with predictability and planning.
Yeah, you still have to manage though when you fill the battery and all that, and I mean, batteries have good utility, but when they had Uri in Texas after day one, there wasn't a lot going on with the batteries, but they do have their place and they do have a lot of utility. So
yeah, I mean, we see it as a solid short-term solution to the generation issue in Delaware, and Senator Hansen is looking at a bill that specifically says battery is not generation, which would allow us to really get that stuff underway.
But you cited California, and that concerns me because California has over 30 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah, well, California has a lot of competing objectives as well, and I personally don't work in California, but a lot of colleagues that do. California was unique with batteries because they really, really built a lot of solar, and there really was an arbitrage opportunity that existed there that batteries came into play in a large way out there, which is why I think they've led around batteries for quite some time.
And it was about the balance you were talking about, and that you have to have that right balance to get the most ideal cost, and storage is part of that. And then citing your numbers, 79%, and I had the same. The 79% of the energy that's coming online is a combination of gas and batteries. Doesn't sound like the diversification that we might need to drive through PJM to drive to a lower cost.
It's over 100 gigs of gas though. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Of gas, right. Yeah. And there's I forget what it was, 18 maybe something like that gigs of nuclear. I don't remember the exact number. 17 or 8. But I think it was around 18 if I'm not mistaken.
I'm getting the signal that we're running over time, so I'm going to ask my last question. And Andrew, you kind of already gave your answer. You can stick with it or give us another one. But if we get this all right, what does success look like in the next 3 to 5 years? And if we don't get it right, what is the risk to Delaware's economic growth and competitiveness?
All right, I'll be quick. Then it's reliability, stabilized, hopefully lower cost, but stabilized cost, and real economic development. Failure is just the opposite. Lower reliability, lower stabilized or increased cost, and less economic development. It'll be we'll face a cost driver by crisis and choices by duress.
Brian?
I'll echo the reliability part, because I think when you talk reliability, there's two ways to think about it. Is your electricity or gas reliably on, or is it reliably off? And if we get it right, you will continue to have reliable power. Continue to be able to take it for granted, and we can work on that, those supply costs, and get bills to be manageable and stable and predictable. And if we get it wrong, you just don't want to think of a state or an economy that is running on unreliable power. You just don't want that.
Joe?
So, one of my old bosses said to me, Joe, you're the eternal optimist. So I always bring that optimistic view to things. And so why I say there's a challenge, I think is a very addressable challenge. So I don't think I think Delaware will handle this accordingly. So I think that Delaware will benefit economically from new business activity, and it may include data centers with that jobs and with that tax base. I think affordability will be protected by the new large load tariff that allocates T&D costs to those that cause the new loads. And I think affordability will be protected by ensuring reliable supply of energy through market improvements that will foster entry of new generation and costs being allocated to those entities causing the need. So I don't think there's a downside. I think this will be addressed. I'm the optimist, but I think the challenge is addressable. So.
Joe says we're going to get it right.
We're going to get it right.
Well, thank you, all three of you, for joining me for this conversation today. I really appreciate it. If our listeners have questions, suggestions for future episode topics, or just want to get in touch with me or any of my colleagues at the Chamber, our contact information can be found online at dscc.com. You can also find the State Chamber on social media, Facebook, X, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. And again, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Delaware Deep Dive, brought to you by the Delaware State Chamber of Commerce. Before we sign off, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen. I know podcast hosts say this all the time, but your support is invaluable, and it helps other listeners easily find us. I'm your host, Kelly Basil. We'll see you soon.